Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Life Science Rundown. This is Nicholas Capman with the FDA Group. Before we jump into our discussion for today, just a little bit about the FDA Group. We help life science companies in the areas of quality assurance, regulatory affairs, clinical operations, commissioning, qualification, and validation, as well as CMC. We offer three different engagement models, which are consulting, staff augmentation, and full-time employee recruitment. So if you ever find yourself in need, just head over to the FDAgroup.com to check us out and get in touch. So today I am speaking with Aaron Snyder. How you doing, Aaron?
I'm good. This is going to be fun, Nicholas.
Yeah, I'm super pumped. So the topic for today is going to be focused on companies that are an army of one in their quality department, or maybe have, just a few people reporting into them, but they know they're on the cusp of having to build a larger QA team. And there's a lot of things that go into that. And you've got great experience in that. So that's really what I wanted us to discuss today. But before we do, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Aaron Snyder. For those of you that have met me or seen me in, say, an Amy training event or at a conference, you can call me AA Ron if you would like. Everyone seems to get that. Now, my background, I've been in the industry for more than 20 years. During that time, I would say 80% of it is in medical device, but I also had some time in the pharmaceutical space. And I've been hired at multiple companies to rebuild or build their quality groups. And as part of that, you have to have a well functioning quality system. And what backs that up is a high performing team. And getting those team dynamics right is really what sets the companies that struggle apart from the companies that are able to accelerate and move to the next level. So,
Hmm.
my background, two bachelor's degrees from Purdue University. I have a master's from Northeastern in regulatory affairs. I train with AAMI and some other organizations, not only industry, but FDA on quality systems, on ISO 1345, 21 CFR 820. And overall, I like to build quality teams. And right now, I am the VP of QA at Allotex. It's a small startup in Boston, and we make tissue implants for eyes. So,
Okay, excellent. Thank you. So one of the things that you said in your intro that caught my attention is you've been hired to improve quality teams, build quality teams. So what would be kind of the trigger for a company to say we need a change in management and we need to contact somebody like you to come in and change everything or improve everything?
yeah, so I've really been lucky that in some of my job moves, it's been there have been different circumstances, of course, because every company is different, and the ask is different related to the team, but I've been able to approach it from many different angles. So my first job as a quality manager, I was given a team of almost 30 employees, and the plant was closing and transferring all the products to Costa Rica. Trying to keep that team together
Mm.
for 2.5 years while the plant is closing and they know they don't have jobs, that presents its own challenge, not only with bringing in consultants to fill gaps, but keeping everyone engaged and making sure that the devices are still safe and effective.
Mm.
From there, getting right to what you asked about, when I went to Waters, they had recognized that their quality system and their quality group wasn't really where it needed to be to support the business that they wanted to expand and grow the IVD business. So they were core analytical test equipment and they wanted to expand in IVD. They knew they needed to get their act together on the FDA side. So they brought in multiple employees, me being one of them, to build out that quality team and to build out the quality system.
Mhm.
I was able to
Yeah.
move on into other roles where the quality group had been depleted and needed to be rebuilt. And in all of those, you have to not only take into account the company where it is at that point, the people they have, where do they want to go, and identify a structure that's going to support that.
Mm. Mm. So we may actually be touching on a couple different things. We might be talking about somebody that's in a position where they need to build a team. Also, we might be talking about somebody that's been brought in a similar fashion to you and has a kind of a bigger task or objective at hand.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I've done them both. I've done all of the different variants, and even at Allotex, I was brought in VP QA, build the quality system, but also hire the team. So
Mm,
starting from me, like you said, the army of one.
mm,
Okay, what does it look like at year one? What does it look like at year two, year three? How many employees? What's the workload? Trying to understand that so that quality facilitates business.
mm.
It's not a roadblock to business.
Yeah.
That's where we want to get.
Now I want to talk about kind of the first 90, but before I jump into that, somebody is interviewing for a position, and it's one of those several situations. One of the things that is going to come to their mind is this the right fit for me, and what am I getting myself into? So during just the interview process, are there any words of advice that you'd give to people as they're considering that next step in their career?
Yeah, whenever you're making a job change, the most important thing that you need to consider, most important, and it's the when it comes to your success, but also whether you will be happy in the role. So success and fulfillment is who are you working for, and do they have the leadership skills that you need to thrive and survive in that role? Because in quality, we're always dealing with problems. We're dealing with challenge, gray things, risk, all of the things that people want to try to just brush to the side. We've got to tackle those head on and find solutions. So if you and your boss aren't aligned, that's going to put a lot of stress on you. So interviewing that direct manager, finding out how they handle conflict, finding out how they communicate challenges, how they communicate missteps or upset people. Your stakeholders are going to get upset from time to time. How are they going to handle those situations? So you really need to dig into that with the hiring manager, and you've got to do the homework to make sure that they're the type of leader that you want to work for.
Mm,
Also, the organization has to be there to support you to make the change happen. And what I mean by that, Waters had identified that they wanted to upgrade their quality system. And it took us quite a bit of time to do that. So the first year or two were very, very difficult. And if the investment wouldn't have been made, so we did have to go out and hire a number of employees. If they said, yeah, we want to get everything going and have you come in and fix it. And then you get there and there's no investment, right? You're told one thing and then the group doesn't support you. You're going to be very frustrated and you're probably not going to last long in that role. Um, when I moved into the pharmaceutical space at Fresenius Kabi, I was really worried that the facility that I was in would not get the support or the investment that was needed to make the changes that they wanted me to make. And when I got there, I found that I was working for the right leaders, I had the right support, we got the investment, and we were able to drive the change. So, really, what I would focus on is the manager, direct manager. Again, how do they handle conflict? How do they communicate bad news? How are they going to help you drive the change? And then also, is the organizational support going to be there? And you've got to do your homework with your questions and your research during the interview process.
Hiring is the polar opposite of firing, right? Firing's horrible. Nobody likes doing it, either party, so on and so
Yes.
forth. And hiring, um, and the reason I say that's the opposite is it's really exciting. There's a lot of hope. There's a lot of excitement, anticipation for the future and what can be developed. We say that grass isn't greener, or the grass isn't always greener. And the reason that even is a cliche is because the interview process is so exciting, right?
Right.
And a lot of times, to your point about what you need to look at, is sometimes and here we go with more cliches, you could be baited and switched, or you could be given
Hmm.
inaccurate information. And then when you join, you find out, oops, this wasn't at all what I had expected. So
Right.
do you have any tips and tricks for how to navigate to really find out, is the company going to be able to support you, and is the manager the right person to be working with? And anything to add there?
Yeah, yeah. I think said it a little bit earlier, right? Finding out how your direct manager deals with conflict is really, really important. Okay. Because in the quality role, you can't make everyone happy. Like there are going to be people that are going to be unhappy with the decision that's made or a direction that's taken. And understanding how they deal with conflict will go a long way to telling you how difficult a lift is going to be, or whether you're truly on your own or whether you're going to have backup and support. Okay.
What types of questions would you recommend people ask in order to get an answer to that question?
Yeah. So management, what's your management style is one. Uh, Be direct. How do you handle conflict?
Hmm.
Um, if you have an employee that's not performing, how do you communicate that to them? Or if a stakeholder comes to you and they're upset about a decision that's been made in the manufacturing plant around product disposition, how do you handle that situation? So it's more of the hypotheticals trying to piece out, like, I've had a lot of managers, whether they're VPs, directors, or quality managers, that are great when there's no pressure,
Right, of course.
right?
Yeah,
But when the pressure gets put on, then you really see what type of person they are. You really
absolutely.
understand if they've got your back or not. You really understand whether they're going to communicate to you even when things are hard to hear. For example, I had a manager who I was given to headcount, and I had selected an employee that I wanted to hire into a quality engineer position, and he didn't like that candidate. And he was going to take the position away from me and actually do the hiring process himself. So, in those instances, how does that communication happen? And why am I getting to the end of the process saying this is the person I want to hire? And then you're coming in and saying, well, that's not what I think you need. How did we get misaligned? So, walking through that process, whether it's going to be them just making the decision and taking it away from you, or whether it's going to be a dialogue, or whether you'll be able to calibrate and course correct. All of those things you got to try to understand throughout the hiring process. Now, luckily, my direct managers, at least my last probably six, have been great. I've been able to ask the questions, be satisfied that they were the type of leader that I wanted to work for. Now, some of my major stakeholders, or after one of those managers left for another role and then I got a new manager, there was some tension then, but I didn't get to interview them and decide whether to work for them. So you're always going to have those dynamics, and understanding those not only the communication style, but how they handle that conflict is going to go a long way into setting you up for success, letting you be able to decide whether that's the right role for you.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so we've gone through the interview process and we've made the decision we're going to take on this job. Okay,
Yep.
explain to me the first 90.
Right. The first 90, you've got to get to know your team right away. And you can take the analogy of a new football coach, whether the NFL or the college, doesn't matter, right? You've got to come in and see what your personnel is and understand, what are they frustrated about, right? Where do they want to go? Whether they want to stay in their current position or whether they really want another position. What are the so focus on the team and spend time with the team and one-on-ones, trying to listen and learn and figure out what their challenges are, and then actually try to do something about those challenges, try to help them set some directions. At the same time, identifying who your major stakeholders are. So is it R&D? So am I in a design quality role and my major stakeholders are the R&D group? Or am I in an operations quality role and my major stakeholders are going to be supply chain and the manufacturing managers? plant managers, whoever, like who are my major stakeholders, and starting to build relationships with them. And that can be through one-on-ones or it can be through lunch, whatever, like starting to build up those relationships. And then from whoever is ultimately responsible for the group that you're in. At Waters, I was in operations. When I was at Cabby, I was in global quality. Like, what are the goals that are laid out for me and my group? What do I need to deliver 1 year, 2 years, whatever, 6 months? What are they looking for me? And then taking all of that after the first 90, and that's when you develop your plan. So the first 90 to me is fact finding, learning, understanding, listening, a lot of listening, and a little bit of action. So this employee is really frustrated about this one thing. I'm going to go have some conversations. I'll try to make some movement on that. All right. I've got this major goal. Let's start to think about how we lay out the path from here to there to get to that goal. Have those conversations with your stakeholders, have them with your team. So there's a lot fact finding, a lot of learning, and thinking ahead about how I'm going to get to where ultimately we want to get to.
Yeah, awesome. Now, as we're going through this process, I'm assuming there's going to be some documentation about what we've learned, some plans. There might even be some specific methods and strategies that you have learned in the past that you might bring into a process like this. So could you comment on that?
Yeah. Whenever you're defining, say, this 90 days, half a year, full year, 3 years, you've got to look at, okay, I have this amount of time and I need to get this done, and then start to break that down. So a simple Gantt chart with some of the higher level tasks, just the activity of kind of putting that on paper and starting to draw it out, you're going to have in your mind that, okay, I think this activity is going to take 2 weeks if I focus 100% on it, but I'm not going to be able to focus 100% on it. So it may take me 6 weeks at whatever, 40%. So then just the activity of putting that together, you'll be able to, it'll stimulate some of that subconscious that when you're walking your dog on the weekend or you're out doing your hobby, whatever it is, pickleball or hiking or jogging, ideas will come and you'll be able to take some of that and take it back and refine your plan. And keep in mind, there is no good writing. There's only good rewriting. And get input from your peers, your stakeholders, from your team. So you make an outline of a plan, you send it to those trusted individuals on your team that you value their input. You get their input, you make a few tweaks, then you start to share it with your stakeholders. Get their input, make a few tweaks. Before the stakeholders, you should go to your manager. Sorry about that. Get them on board, get their buy-in, then go to your stakeholders. And by that point, you're probably going to have a pretty robust plan that then you can communicate wider, communicate to the whole QA team, communicate it to the plant if it's affecting the entire manufacturing plant, whoever at that point. You want to communicate it though, and you can't under communicate. Under communicate will lead to problems. So get it out there, take all the feedback, reiterate it on a monthly or some sort of basis, provide status updates to hold yourself accountable, but also to let everyone know that you're making progress. And on top of that, if you're stuck, you're spinning your wheels, asking for help. So going to those stakeholders, hey, we've hit a roadblock here. Is there anything that we can do together to help us get past this? Right. And doing the outreach, because if you're stuck and you have either a stakeholder that's blocking you or it's just a structural block, you're going to need help to get past that. Of course, you want your leadership team, but a lot of times it's going to take more than your leadership team to get past some of the bigger challenges that we're presented with. And you've got to bring everyone together. And then that's when some of those more difficult stakeholders will fall in line.
Yeah, love it. I was thinking when you mentioned the Gantt chart, there's also something that we use at the FDA group. It's it's like an org chart, but we call it an accountability chart. So
Oh,
it looks exactly like an org chart because
yeah.
it is. However, under each person, it lists what they're accountable for. And
Nice.
one of the things that we subscribe to is if more than one person is responsible, then nobody's responsible.
Right. That gets back to a RACI. If you write a RACI table out correctly, there should only be one A and one R in every row. If
Mhm.
you have multiple R's, like you said, if two groups are responsible, it's not going to get done because you're going to get this.
Yeah.
And that means that step has too many, it's too big. It needs to be broken out because
Mhm.
there's one part of it that's probably one group and there's another part that's another group. So your level of detail may not be to the specificity that you need to provide clarity to the organization.
Yeah. And actually, in the first 90, when we're talking about getting to know our, the stakeholders and the team and building relationships during the documentation, if people decide to do an accountability chart, it probably will present itself that there may need to be some changes. And so that's probably something that people should keep in the back of their mind, that that's one of the things we want to be focusing on.
Oh, absolutely. Like if you're sitting down and talking to people and you're saying, "Hey, I started working on this accountability chart, and it says here that the design group is responsible for the risk management file." When I talked to this group over here, they said, "No, it's design quality." So I've got two groups pointing fingers at each other. I'm like, who is it? Like,
Mm.
help me understand this. I don't understand. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And maybe even if there's agreement on accountability, there still might need to be changes because it might not make sense for, whatever the plans are with that department.
well, it's great that you say that because companies grow. Like everything changes over time. So companies are growing, they're expanding in one area, they're contracting in others. You have some turnover. The organization needs to adapt to what the current needs are. And that's really difficult when we get a rigid HR, human resource kind of hierarchy, but also when we have people that are sitting in those roles that may need to be they've stopped doing some work. And now they need to pick up other work. So you're talking about updating job descriptions. People are going to be asking about, okay, well, do I need more comp because I'm taking on more work? Well, we're highlighting here that you're not doing this work anymore. So, like, if that's not clear, you're going to add a lot of tension and stress within your organization. And that's when we start to get some of the problems that hold organizations back. So absolutely, when you're building that accountability matrix like you're talking about, you're going to highlight probably changes that have occurred from when that organization was originally defined and opportunities that if you make some adjustments are going to help the organization accelerate.
Yep, absolutely. Um, I'm going to comment on that, but the one thing I wanted to say that you had mentioned earlier was, over communicate. And we know from studies that somebody has to hear something 7 times before it really clicks.
Yeah.
So there's that. Also, um, whatever is a priority in terms of communication, um, your point about over communicating, um, when you communicate that priority, you want people to start rolling their eyes because they've heard it so many times.
They got it.
Right,
Right. Yeah.
right. So if people are rolling their eyes like, yep, I know, Aaron, yep, it's that, yep, I get it. That means the message is getting through. So
Yeah.
that's one I would say thing that people can be looking for is if people it becomes almost like a joke that this is something that gets talked about over and over again.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And the communication too, to add on to that, the over communicate is also about accountability for you too, right? So communicate the progress that you're making or the lack of progress, and it'll help hold the organization accountable and yourself for driving that change.
yeah. Now, one of the other things is as teams are growing, well, first, before the team's growing, there are things that we're measuring, right? And I like to call those measurables. People can say KPIs or whatever the case may be.
Quality objectives.
Yeah, right. And so there's a couple things to look at. One is, are we collecting information for the sake of collecting information? Or are we collecting information that is driving good decision making?
Yeah, this is a delicate topic because we do have 21 CFRA 20, 1345 setting out there saying you're going to measure complaints, you're going to measure internal audits, you're going to look at your product and your process performance. Okay, so inside those areas, okay, what are we looking at? And are we looking at something that's going to actually help us decide whether our quality system is effective, right? And defining what those metrics are difficult. And when you add in, you kind of have this drive from the operations side. We want to focus on efficiency. We want to do waste elimination. We want lean Six Sigma, whatever it is, right? Those are going to drive different behaviors where you have the quality group saying, whoa, we got to meet these 1345 requirements. We need to look at this data. And other groups are being like, I don't care about that data. It doesn't pertain to my group. I'm worried about throughput or cycle time or scrap counts. So finding the right balance there is really important. And this is where, especially if you're in an established company, say a bigger company, a Boston side, J&J, they may have some corporate structure in place where you have to report on metrics every month, and the metrics aren't really helping you at the facility. It's a lot of work for you to enter them into whatever the system is, and they get rolled up to the top, and then a month later you get questions. What about this? What about this? What about that? So yeah, there's always opportunity to look at what we're measuring and what's the reason we're measuring that, and do we actually do something as a result of that data? Okay. And one of the challenges that I think a lot of the regulators have is when they come in and look at data, it's quality system data, they're going to ask, what are your triggers? Like, okay, yeah, you're looking at internal audit findings, but how do you know whether that's good or whether that's bad? Right? Is you're looking at CAPAs, like, what are you looking at? Number open, number closed, number overdue, number failed effectiveness. How are you breaking that down? Again, what's good look like? What's bad look like? Like, what are your triggers? And when do you take action? That is all highly subjective and really difficult to define. So there's probably no good way to do it because every organization is different. You just want to ask those questions, like you said, what are we using this data for? Why are we collecting it? How are we going to use it? And hopefully that drives you to the right set of metrics within meeting those regulatory expectations from 1345 and 820.
Yep, absolutely. The other thing is, and I noticed this in terms of growth companies, is metrics can change. So something we were measuring before now isn't relevant.
Right. Yeah.
And now we actually have to implement new measurables or metrics, etc. Because with the growth, these are the new priorities, and these are things that we have to be tracking.
Absolutely. Right. As the company grows, think about if you're a startup, right? You have one product line. Okay. Now I have two product lines. Am I going to measure the same thing for both product lines? Maybe if it's a line extension, but if it's a completely different product with a new intended use, maybe new technology, I may not be measuring the same thing. So that analysis needs to go in to defining, what's right for this stage of our business. And that's what's great about the quality system is the quality system is all about continuous improvement. and you have the change control function so that you can make changes to improve your process, to make it more relevant to what you do. So you should be learning every nonconformance you get, every CAPA that you open. You should be learning something during the investigation, during the risk assessment. We found some root causes. We're going to implement these actions. Okay, we got to do some verification, some validation. Okay, we're learning through that entire process. If we're not updating our quality system as we're learning, then we're going to lose that knowledge gain when people leave.
Yeah, absolutely. And then as I'm fusing a couple different ideas. I'm thinking about measurables. I'm also thinking about communication.
Mm-hmm.
So we know it's good to over communicate. There's also a division between are we working in the business or working on the business, right? So there's those two questions, right? Are we working in the quality system or working on the quality system?
Mm-hmm.
Also, there's the meeting cadence. So are we doing weekly meetings, quarterly meetings, annual meetings? And what are we
Yep.
doing during those different time periods? So
Right.
can you comment on that?
Yeah, and this is going to be highly dependent on the organization you're in. So, for example, I'm at Fresenius Kabi. I'm the head of QA for a pharmaceutical manufacturing facility. I have a daily meeting with operations where we have to look at plant issues that are happening daily, batch release, all of the stuff. Then I have a biweekly meeting with my staff, the quality assurance team staff. We have a monthly meeting with corporate QA to present out the plant quality metrics. And then there are other meetings that fall in there. Okay. Now, finding the right mix, and you need to sit down and think through it and develop a communication strategy to fit those meetings. What am I going to communicate when and on what frequency? That needs to be part of your thought process when it comes to any initiative, any goal, whatever it is. And if you don't think about it, you won't communicate. If you think about it and put a plan in place, it will drive a little more accountability because I can tell you that I have to put together reports weekly or biweekly for different meetings. And every time I'm doing it the day of the meeting, and I'm kind of like, this is a chore. That chore, though, is really important because my updates in those meetings are going to highlight not only what my team's working on, but where we need help or what we've achieved and where we're going. And other groups can say, hey, that dovetails with what I'm doing, or let me jump in there and help you with that. And it gives you a forum to have those discussions. The one thing I will say on that with the over communicate is if you're going into a meeting and you're going to be delivering news that's maybe not going to be seen as positive, don't surprise people. So have conversations with your stakeholders beforehand so they know what to expect.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having a good meeting cadence and structure allows for people managing teams to avoid a couple things. One is the ad hoc, everything's on fire meetings, and every day I'm being brought in. That's
Mm-hmm.
that can be very, very disruptive and it can bring morale down.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the flip side, um, are there situations where there aren't enough meetings and, the threads of, connection are starting to tear apart. So I think that's something that's important for everybody to focus on.
Yeah. So in your big companies, especially if you're in a manager or higher role, it's going to be hard for you to keep time open on your calendar. You're going to have meeting overload. Like, you're going to have to put blocks in to just block off time. And even then, some of that time is going to get eaten up. So at least that's been my experience. Like it's really difficult to not give in and accept all the meetings. Like you actively need to decline meetings and ask, hey, do you really need me in this meeting, or can I delegate it to someone on my team? So now that's completely different than the small company. So in the small company, you there are going to be days that are meeting heavy, but then you're going to have days with no meetings at all. And you're going to kind of be able to set your own clip. And so at Allotex for the last year, I've had a lot of flexibility. Like I have one standing meeting a week, actually two. Um, we have a basically where the whole group gets together and we all do our report outs, and then I have a one-on-one with my staff. So I had two on my staff, but right now I'm waiting on my new quality intern to start. So I just have one on my staff. So within that framework, understanding what you're communicating when and actively deciding, do I need another standing meeting or can I utilize one of the meetings that is already in place? Like, don't schedule a meeting just because you think you need to communicate something and put a recurring meeting in. Look at what's already there. Look at your current infrastructure and can I better utilize that to get my message out to the team? Now, sometimes you may have to do like an ad hoc all QA meeting once a quarter. I would try not to do it ad hoc. I would try to put some, say, hey, we're going to do it every March, July, October, or whatever, January. Just try to put some guidelines around it. It's going to be an hour long. What's what we're going to update on our goals for the year, whatever it is, major projects. So you want to make sure that you're doing that communication because again, it gets back to accountability. It keeps everyone engaged and it holds yourself accountable for showing your work and showing what you're delivering.
Yeah. You mentioned earlier about sometimes you have to deliver news that isn't going to be super exciting.
Unfortunately, yes, we have to do that.
That does happen. Now, this is just an anecdote that I'm going to share, and I need to do a better job of citing where I hear these things. But this wasn't my idea, but it's something that I subscribe to, is that the tr the truth will only set you free with hope. So now, in some cases, there is no hope, and we're going to be closing the facility, but outside of that, when you're delivering the bad news or the real news or whatever,
Mhm.
try to consider the hope that is to come, because that really helps, I found, in delivering news that people aren't super thrilled to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that I mean there's a lot of stuff out there that talks about if you've read the book Good to Great,
Oh yeah,
they
Jim
have
Collins.
the Stockdale paradox where you have to recognize the situation you're in and you need to be brutally honest about the situation you're in, whether it's good or bad, while maintaining hope that it's going to be better, right? If you don't recognize the situation you're in, then you're not going to come across as authentic. Maybe you're going to be overly Pollyanna-ish, whatever it is, or you'll be the flip side. Everything will be doom and gloom, and quality can never win. We're never going to get ahead. So recognize that yes, this is where we are,
Mhm.
right? That's where we're going, and we got some challenges that we need to address to get there, and keep that constant message of yeah, where we are, it's not the desired situation. And that's where we're going. And we're going to do this together and keeping that positive face on it while recognizing where you are.
Yeah. And I don't want to beat a dead horse in terms of the meetings. I want to get into the personnel, but the one thing I will say is I'm a big fan of weekly, quarterly, and annual meetings. And the one I want to focus on in particular is the quarterly meeting.
Okay.
And the reason I mention this is a piece that people should consider is I found that our motivation, enthusiasm, and ambition have a 90-day shelf life.
Okay.
And what that means is that if people are able to have quarterly meetings, they're able to reflect on how did they do that past quarter? Did they achieve their results? Didn't they achieve their results? What needs to be done different? And then what is the quarter to come? And what are our priorities, goals, and objectives? And then focusing on that, which usually is just a segment of the annual goal, assuming that you're staying on track. But in those quarterly meetings, one of the things it's not just about reviewing what's happened and what we're going to be doing. One of the things that I found has happened is the motivation, excitement, and ambition container gets refilled. Another, analogy is, the fire, it's the embers are starting to glow, and the flame is starting to dissipate. That quarterly meeting can really relight the whole thing. So it's just kind of something that I've seen and learned, and something I think people should consider. Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
So let's talk about the people, right? One of the
Hmm.
things that we've done during this first 90 is, among everything else, is determining, do we have the right people in the right seats? So comment on your previous experience and that whole process.
Yeah, it's never easy. You're going to have people that are in the wrong seat. Like if you come in and you have a team of 5 people and you talk to all 5 of them and you're like, these are the 5 I would choose, you're very lucky. Now, when I got to Waters, I had 11 people when I started, and I would say probably 4 of them were in the wrong role. Like they were not, it's not like they weren't working hard. They were working very hard. They weren't making any progress working very hard because the role was not set up well, and their skill set wasn't the best for that role. And having conversations around that is very, very hard. Um, when I came into, I worked for 2 years, 2.5 years at a Swedish company, and I had multiple direct reports at the corporate headquarters. And one of them had a reputation of being ultra focused on detail and being a little bit high strung and being difficult to work with. And within 3 months, it was very evident that that person was not in the right role. And during one of our conversations, I got asked directly, "Do you trust me?" And my response was, "No, I can't trust you. I
Yeah.
give you little things and they become big problems for me. So, how am I going to give you a big, serious project and not be worried that that's going to blow up and cause a huge problem within the company?" And within 2 weeks of that meeting, that individual resigned and went to another company and got a better job.
Yeah.
So, it not only does that difficult conversation, maybe not in the moment, help that employee, but ultimately it gives them the information that they need to make a better decision about what they're doing, where they want to be, and those conversations. So to go back to my Waters example, I had 11 individuals on my team when I started. One of those was not in the right role. When we got to the first annual review and we had to go through the performance evaluation and the merit increase, by that time, I defined the structure that I wanted, and I was able to have the conversation with that employee and be like, "Look, this is not the right role for you, and I see that you're killing yourself. I see that you're bashing your head up against the wall and you're not making any progress, and you work too hard to leave here unhappy every day.
Mm.
So let's talk about what the right role is for you." And we had some conversations. That person came back to me. Then, like that conversation was full of tears and emotion, and
Mm.
it was really difficult. And then the next day, it was, "You were right,
Mm.
and this is the job that I want to move into."
Yeah.
And the role that that person wanted to move into fit in my new organization that I had defined, and that person excelled in that role. Much less stress, less happier every day. Without that difficult conversation, we wouldn't have got to that point.
Yeah.
So sometimes the employees end up leaving on their own. Hopefully, that's what you want if that's what's needed. Sometimes you have to help them out the door the very hard way through performance improvement plans and HR meetings and all of that stuff. And other times you find the role where they can excel within the group, and it's everything in between.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And I think, um, radical candor comes into play, and my definition of radical candor is speaking in a firm, friendly, authoritative, and polite manner where you're getting right to the point without being a jerk and not walking on eggshells, right? So,
But with that, right, you want to be honest about the situation without honest, authentic, right? And professional. So it's not personal. Like
mhm,
it feels personal because you're getting feedback about your work and those things. When you're delivering that, it's like, I see you struggling. Like I know that you're not happy when you leave here. Like you tell me on a daily basis. Like
mm,
having those conversations. If you just go into it like I don't like this person and I got to get rid of him, that's going to be a really hard conversation. Like you said, like you're going to come across as being a jerk, and you need again recognize the current situation. Talk about what you see, and this is the way I've always been able to do it, is say, this is where I see you succeeding. Like, here's your skill set. This is what the job needs. I think you can really do this. Sometimes I don't have the job. So
mm,
this isn't the right fit. Here's where I see your strengths, and I don't have that position in this group right now. It just doesn't exist. So at that point, start having conversations about what can I do to help you get into that position, whether it's at another company or within my current company.
yeah. One of the things you were referring to also was the direct question you got, which is, do you trust me? And you said no. Um, my equation for trust is character plus competence. So, or character times competence. So if you don't have the character, that's going to be an issue. If you don't have the competency, that's going to be an issue. But if you can marry those two, that's what results in trust. There's also a pyramid that was created by Peter Lencioni, and it talks about in conversations, how do we optimize it, right? And so the bottom of that pyramid is trust. We have to trust each other, otherwise there's nowhere else to go.
Mm-hmm.
After we trust each other, then we can engage in conflict, meaning we're having radically candid
Yeah.
conversations about issues in the company. Out after that comes commitment. So whether that person gets what they want or don't, there has to be an agreement that we're committing on this next step.
Mm-hmm.
After that comes accountability, which is, are we holding that person or people accountable for what we committed to? And then the tip of the pyramid is results, and are we getting those results? So that was a little anecdote I wanted to throw in there. Um, Speed rounds. We've got
Okay.
5 minutes left. I would like you to talk about, we've done all of this stuff. Now we've got to grow the team. Talk to me about what your input is in terms of hiring and bringing people in.
Right. When there is a need to grow your team, you've got to make a business case. So, and to make a business case, you need to know what the work demands are. So, take, for example, me at Allotex right now. So, I have a quality engineer that reports into me, and I have a quality intern, right? If my quality engineer is leaving the office stressed out because she's not getting all her work done, and there's too much work, so complaints have come in. There's non-conformances in manufacturing. There's a CAPA that's overdue. Oh, we got an internal audit that we have to do next week. Oh, we got to qualify a new supplier. At that point, right, I'm probably need another person, right? In order to understand what that person will be doing, though, I need to look at my organization, and I'm going to have to divide up the current workload for my org. What's on me, what's on my quality engineer, what's on my intern, and then what's this new person going to do, and write that job description. Okay, they're going to focus on customer complaints, they're going to focus on sales, order review, and those types of things. Okay, how many hours a week is that? Is it 20 hours a week? Is it 30 hours a week? Is it a full-time role? Is it a part-time role? Okay. You've got to understand what the person's going to do, write job description, then make the business case. go into whoever the decider is, whether it's the VP of Ops or the CEO. Okay, we're falling behind in these areas. I've done a review, comprehensive review of my team, and this is how we're going to reshuffle the work if we're allowed to hire this person. If we're not allowed to hire this person, then we're going to fall behind in these areas. You've got to show both. Like, we're going to fall behind over here if we don't get this. Okay, because if you don't show both options, then you're not giving them the full picture to make a decision. The decision may be to wait 3 months, okay? And then you can come back at the next meeting, say, okay, if I wait 3 months, this is probably what's going to happen, and we estimate that we can recover within blah, 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 whatever. So you want to make the business case, understand what the person is doing, and to do that, you got to define whatever that new org is going to look like. So I know you said speed round. Sorry, I got a little bit long
No,
there.
that was great.
Yeah.
To your point, and then we'll wrap it up. When I call them swells and trajectories. So is my team working 50 to 60 hours a week because of a short-term situation and it's going to come back down? So that's a swell. A trajectory is they're working 50 to 60 hours a week and there's no reason to believe that it's going to decrease without added support.
Right.
So that's one thing that I think people should keep in their mind. The other thing is, as we're trying to determine the person that gets brought in, this is something that we've seen a lot from my side of the business, is people will bring in contractors before hiring a full-time employee. And the reason for that can be many reasons. The primary is usually, I need to get this work started while I'm recruiting. So that's generally the primary reason. However, there's some adjacent benefits to it. Is that job description actually what's being done, or does it need to be updated? Are the qualifications for that role accurate, or does that need to be updated? Since the person's in that role and they can see what the requirements are, could they assist in the interviewing process, or could they assist in training up that person? So as you're thinking about hiring full-time employees, sometimes it's a good idea to bring in a contractor while you're recruiting, because you'll be able to take advantage of some of those benefits.
Everything you said was great. Like, I'm a big believer, and I've done this at all of my companies, is having the person that's interviewing, so the person coming in to interview, meet with as many people on the team as possible. Now, granted, you don't want them there for a full day and to go through a firing line of interviews, but if they're going to be managing people, I let the direct reports interview them. If they're going to be part of a 4-person team, I want all 4 people to be able to sit down with them. Now, it doesn't have to be one-on-one. I could do groups. So your observation there that you can have the contractor be part of the interview process, I think that's fantastic, because it gives the candidate the opportunity to ask the contractor about the role, what's frustrating about it, what do they like about it, and get to know whether it's, again, if it's the right role for them, if it's what they're looking for.
Yep, absolutely. This was awesome. It was a lot of fun, and I knew it was going to be. What would you like to leave the audience with before we close?
Hey, look me up on LinkedIn if you want, or YouTube. I have a YouTube channel where I do some quality system videos. I haven't made some videos for about a year, but I'm hoping to get back in the saddle, get them out there. So if you're interested in 21 CFR 820, 1345, check out my YouTube videos. They're quick, high-level primers, kind of help you get the concepts crossed. If you have any questions, feel free to send those to me. I like to answer questions and help people. We're all in this together. Like, we're all in the medical device industry trying to help patients, trying to meet the FDA expectations, trying to ensure that our devices are safe and effective. And when you need help, reach out to someone like Nicholas, reach out to someone like me. I'll share my thoughts with you, and we'll help patients out. So Thank you for doing this, Nicholas. It was fantastic, and I hope we can do it again soon.
Absolutely. And really appreciate the time. And as always, for everybody listening, if you find conversations like this valuable, please share it with a colleague or your professional network. If you haven't already, subscribe to get updates of new episodes at the FDAgroup.com/podcast and follow the FDA Group on LinkedIn. If you'd like to connect about project or resource needs, head over to the FDAgroup.com to get in touch, or feel free to connect with me personally on LinkedIn.